Hello guys, Sound Husky here. Welcome back to Death Masterclass, the Wizard101 educational series that I'm doing for death wizards that are willing to learn more about death wizards and better understand how they work so that they can master the school and also optimize their gameplay better so that they can really get through the game. This is for, like I said before, it's for experienced players, but it's also for the new guys that may want to pick up death and try to really use death as a learning tool for other schools rather than just for questing. Anyways, today's chapter is chapter 3. We're doing spell deck optimization and building. We're not going to do like an actual teaching you how to build your spell deck, but that's more of sort of like a beginner thing that if you wanted a beginner guide, I could do that for like certain basics. But besides that, main thing we are focusing on is spell deck optimization. So what does a spell deck, or what makes a spell deck optimal, is you limit the amount of cards you have in your deck to make sure you get your cards that you want up. You keep unneeded cards out of the spell deck and only put in what works best for the situation or what will work in most situations. Because the spare one or two times you need to maybe put something in, that's cool. But then you take it out, and then most of the time, the spell deck that you have built works perfectly. You limit copies of cards so you don't overload your deck with a single card that could be useless in a different situation, i.e., overflowing your spell deck with a ton of converts, where then you would have to delete them every time you pulled one when you're fighting non-death enemies. And lastly, you set certain cards to come out of your treasure card sideboard to keep your deck tidy and clean. And yes, here we go. Two examples of optimize. Here are two examples. One is optimized, the other one is unoptimized. You could probably tell which one's which. The top one is very unoptimized, and the Death Deck 2 is optimized. So first, we can ask why is one optimized and the other one isn't. Consider these deciding if it's optimized. Are you able to pull for the cards you need? Your hits, your blades, your traps, stuff like that. Do you have enough enchants for your hitting spells, like your colossals, these spells here? Do you have enough of them to get most of your hits enchanted so they do more damage? Do you limit utility spells in your main deck and put them aside into your treasure card sideboard? And are you sticking to your main damage output and limiting non-death damage hits in your deck? Not including the wand hits, of course. The top spell deck is very cluttered. As you can see, we have a ton of different shields and such. But we also have 3 AoE hits. We have 2 enchants. We have way too many sharpened blades and potent traps. We also have a ton of shields, and the sideboard on Death Deck 1 has a ton of they're not utility spells, but they're also all a mixed match of different school hits. Now, this may be okay for early game, but late game and mid game, this is very unoptimal. The bottom deck, on the other hand, as we can see here, has four spells, 4 hitting spells, 4 enchants. Matches up. You have 5 blades, but you only have 2 sharpened blades, since you don't really need a ton of sharpened blades. You have 1 potent for 2 feints, which is good, so you can stack your feints. You have reshuffle for reshuffling if you need to. You have 2 virulence, so you can power up your death spells. And then you have your utility spells like empower. There's your converts. You have some TC blades. You have shield countering by using pierce. And you also have some clenched charms if you need them. And virulent plagues if you need to buy some time and weaken down enemy spells. So Death Deck 1 is unoptimized because there's limited chance for your hitting cards. There's too much overflow of utility cards, i.e. the shields. Sideboard is comprised only of non-death spell hits. The deck has way too much single target hits that are not optimal for dealing damage. Certain situations render the Storm and Ice shields irrelevant and unneeded. Unoptimized decks are very fun to mess around with and limit test with, but lead to slower fights. Obviously, if you want to be non-optimal in your questing, that is perfectly fine. You do slow down your progression, especially later in the game when bosses do have more health and deal more damage, i.e. big old meat shields, especially in second arc when you get to Azteca Chrysalis. So Def Deck 2, taking what we know, the deck is optimized because you have enough chance for the amount of hitting spells you had, can add more spells into it, more hitting spells into it if you want some flexibility. You have limited cards in your deck and a reshuffle if you need to. Utility cards like the Virulent Plague, Cleanse, Pierce are set aside in your sideboard to reduce main deck clutter. You have enough cards that you won't have to be constantly discarding stuff, and that leads to not having to worry about having enough cards to deal with. But you also have the ease of using this deck in multiple fights without needing to switch stuff on the fly. One big example of that was, of course, the Mass Prisms that we had in the spell deck in the sideboard. Because we have those there, we don't need to worry about adding prisms into our main deck, which would just clutter the deck up even more. So, like I said, this one was more of a breeze to go over just because of what it is. But here is what deck optimizing can teach you. A deck that is way too small, can lead to unwanted fleas if you don't kill the enemies. But a deck too big slows down questing and progression. That is a very common trope for questing. That leaving utility spells like shields and such to sideboard in PvE can be a better option than cluttering your main deck with them, as you would in PvP or such like that. You want to have shields like that in your main deck just in case. It lets you experiment with certain spells and see how they can work in the deck, even if it might not seem optimal in paper. I.e., in that one on Def Deck 2, there was the triple infection that you could put up to set up your Avenging Fossil Gambit. We will discuss that in the next chapter when we go over advanced deck correlation and spell elements. And it also lets you self-express your own deck setups that can work even if it isn't supposed to be the cookie-cutter best deck setup. Obviously, people like to teach the blade up, fate up, and then just go for it. It's simple, it's easy to do, it's easy to pull off. Especially later down the line when health does not become a factor for enemies anymore, you can get away with this. But that doesn't mean you need to do it all the time. Because deck optimization will keep you from needing to worry about having to set up for those big hits and just sailing away with it. I think I did this in in the gameplay thing during the intro, as I discussed how setting up your spell deck and such to where you maybe put in single hits to deal with bosses can be helpful if you want to, not be, if you want to try something that's not the sort of cookie cutter, the same bland thing every single time. You can experiment. And that's what deck optimization can do, is you can experiment with what best works with your style. If you want to play more around using AoEs, go for it. Nobody's stopping you from doing that. But if you want to go and do something where you do want to follow more, only limit AoEs and want to use more single hit stuff, that's fine too. Do you want to try to experiment with, gambits and stuff and get some really cool interactions going on? Go for it. Nothing is stopping you from optimizing the deck the way you want to play. And that's how a lot, I think, Death can do it a lot different. Obviously, Storm. One great idea. One thing that you may notice is Storm really doesn't have a clear cut, setup optimization in terms of its spell deck because most of the time they can just one shot with AoEs, which leaves little to no, um, you know, skill, spell expression, as I could call it. Whereas Death can really have that sort of spell expression through its gambits and also just the ability to just not be able to just have this different way of playing it. You can really build your spell deck any way you want. It's up to you. But optimizing it and making it, optimal can also be very fun because creating the ideal deck for you might not be the same for somebody else, and that is perfectly fine. Because at the end of the day, we're all different and we're all going to have different ideas of what we want to use our main deck in sideboard for. And also that some people might just not want to go about wanting to, optimize their deck or even optimize their sideboard or their main deck, and they just want to go with the basis that they have been taught through, people just telling them to use a small deck, have some fates, have some blades, and then just AoE. That can be considered optimal, but it also can lead to what I would consider a sort of questing burnout or just repetitivity burnout or something along the lines because you're doing the exact same thing over and over and over and over again. Whereas if you optimize your deck, you can sort of play each fight a little differently than the last. Even though it might seem that, it is still repetitive because you're still doing these similar gameplay loops, you're just mixing it up a little bit. And that's what deck optimizing really does, as well as gear optimizing. So when you take these two concepts together and put them into one thing, you have a multitude of different ways to express your skill set as a Death Wizard. Whether if it's being a little bit more tanky but still being able to deal enough damage to kill bosses, or maybe you want to show off that your Death Wizard can still hit very hard and you want to set your deck up like that. You want to optimize around your multitudes of damage because you can make your deck resemble and better suit your full straightforward damage playstyle of your full damage pet and gear. And like I said, we'll go over a whole bunch of other things, more advanced things, when we get to the spellements and also just how to sort of make an advanced deck composing. How to compose a deck with, more advanced things in mind, i.e. gambits, stuff like that. So hopefully this has hopefully you have been able to learn a little bit of thing about deck optimization and how to maybe go about building your deck just a little bit differently the next time you play the game, just so you can maybe enjoy a fight in a different, or see fights in a different light. Because not all fights need to be the same cookie cutter, blade up, trap the boss, and just kill them both with a single AoE. You can really do some fun, interesting things utilizing deck optimization to not only give you the same power as that cookie cutter playstyle of blade, trap, AoE to kill everything, but it also lets you just express your skills in your PvE skill expression a little bit better. So hopefully this guy give you a little bit to look at, and be sure, come back to this later, or even go back and read through some of the slides if you needed to really think about it. Also, one big announcement is I am going to start death coaching, death school coaching for PvE players. So if you are a death student, if you are a death school main, and you want some help trying to maybe better understand deck optimization or gear optimization, please let me know in the comments or go to the Discord server. Um, It is linked on my channel, so if you go to my channel, you can just find the Discord link and join from there. Because coaching will be starting up, it is completely free. You do not need to pay anything. You're getting free on the spot coaching to let you remember, just sort of figure out everything. To better get your wizard set up for success. And that's what the Death Masterclass was made for. And I hope it is making a difference if you are somebody who really wants to learn. So that's all I have. I thank you guys so much for stopping by, watching the Death Masterclass for Chapter 3, Spell Deck Optimization. We'll get into the actual building stuff in Chapter 4 when we start utilizing, when we go into more advanced stuff like spell elements and setting up gambits and such like that. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And I will see you guys in the next chapter for the Death Masterclass. Have a good one.